All right. Thank you, everybody, for joining us here today. I definitely see some familiar faces, and a handful that I would say are pretty technologically savvy, which hopefully bodes well. What I'm hoping to do here today is present a NAEOP Tech Talk about just kind of Teams and Google Workspaces. These tend to be regardless of your institution, we're likely on one of these two platforms. And if you are associated with any kind of state or regional association, you are likely on these things. So we thought it'd be a good idea to just kind of do a general overview about kind of what are some tips and tricks to get the most out of these. And then maybe a little at the end about like, how can you make these work together? Because if you're often working in some shared spaces with people from different institutions, there's a lot of challenges that can come with a Google institution versus a Microsoft and trying to share things and do things together. So my name is Matt Bezick. I work as the executive director for the Oregon Trio Association, and I am the technology and communications member of the NAEOP board. And I'm going to present some of my expertise and stuff that I have found, but I very much am hoping for this to be a pretty collaborative conversation where folks can kind of chime in and weigh in about how they use some of these different tools or just ask some unique questions. I'm intending my piece, hopefully it will not be terribly long. You can see there's only like 13 slides here, but I'm hoping for this to be a pretty kind of moderate level of expertise. I'm not going to get like too in the weeds. But as somebody who's relatively technologically savvy, sometimes I think you can take for granted some of the daily things that you do within these applications that make your job easier. And we're hoping to kind of have a space to share that stuff out. So what we're going to be doing today, kind of halfway through the introduction here, but I wanted to go over just the thing we use most all day, just kind of email basics, calendar basics. And then for both the Google Workspace and Microsoft, it's just kind of do an overview of kind of the apps and applications that are available to you, just to make sure that you're kind of aware of what some of the tools are out there for and how you can maybe use that within your job. And then lastly, kind of just touch on the chat features that exist within these. And lastly, just kind of go to questions and more of an open forum time. And if you have any questions or comments, feel free to just raise a hand or dump them in the chat, and I can kind of address those as I go forward. So just as an introduction, feel like I'm already in the midst of this, but I previously had served as like a technology chair for the Oregon Trail Association. I'm doing it for NAEOP right now. I'm not somebody who was an expert in this field. Like I don't come from a technology or coding background. I was just somebody who's good at looking things up on Google and YouTube and just kind of have acquired a lifetime worth of tips and tricks. And I think that is very much more what we're going for here than me teaching you how to like HTML code a website. Like that is very much not what we're trying to do. It's just how can we use the tools that we have at our fingertips to make our life simpler and easy. So my hope is I can kind of present some of that for you today. Okay, so where I am starting is where most of us live most of our day, and that is just email. I think there are a couple of areas that should be utilized far more in email. Email should be a productivity tool and not necessarily something that is like bringing stress and anxiety into your life. So in order to make it an actual productivity tool, you kind of have to find a way to maximize its functions to help you stay organized and avoid what I've seen before, which is like 3,000 unread emails in your work email. And that just feels absolutely horrifying to me because that seems scary that you're not going to stay organized or that you're going to just miss things. Like, how can we organize stuff to not miss things? I say try to be a zero inbox champion. I can maybe do a quick like humble brag. I'm going to share a different screen. It might not, the formatting may be a little wonky. You're not necessarily supposed to read everything that's on the screen, but I have this application, but I manage 8 separate inboxes currently, right? This one is just like my own personal one. There's 5 in there. This is my active work one. I have a few, but there are so many of them where there is literally, almost no unread emails. And I think that is the goal. It doesn't mean you don't have work, but I want to kind of show you some tools and tricks I use to kind of keep these things organized. What I have here, this one that was loaded with them, the 2013, this is basically a staff members who manage their own email. And I'm just monitoring it until I get a new person in this role. And it was horrifying to me to see that there's like 2,000 emails out here because I have no idea how a person's supposed to stay organized if this is what your inbox looks like. So what I wanted to highlight, there are kind of three main areas, and then there's just another basic kind of email how-to. But the primary functions, a lot of people like to folder or like categorize their emails. They have a million folders, so that way it's easy to find old historical information. And that is very much true, but going through the work to like archive and inbox your emails can be pretty overwhelming. But there is a button on both Microsoft and Google to where you can just archive messages. So my first and most important tip is if you just want to keep this email, you don't want to delete it, but you don't like need it. There's not any action required of you. There's nothing you need to do. Every single email that's out there, you can just hit like an archive button. And all it does is kind of take it out of your inbox and it just stores it on the cloud for your email. And at any point, you can just search in your mail and find it again. It takes a little more time. It's a little clunky. Sometimes you got to have the right keywords that you're searching for, but it just will dramatically reduce your inbox if you know that this is not something that requires work from me. There's not something I'm waiting for. It's not like some information I need to be able to reference in the future. I just don't want to delete it, but I want to keep it. Just desperately, please use your archive button. It can just clear so much crap out of your inbox so that the stuff that's in there can be actually relevant and meaningful to you. Favorites. So both Microsoft and Google have this ability to favorite. Let's say you have something where it's like, this email from Juan here is important to me. There's no work that is necessary for me, but let's say this is important information from your boss, your institution. If I just star this, right, you kind of make it a favorite, I can still archive it. So it's gone. It's out of the inbox. But you can still go to your favorite or your starred sections and have access to kind of that really short list of like, these are just things I want to be able to reference. Whether it's like your low income thresholds charts, right? Just information you want to quickly be able to reference. You can easily just kind of do the star, do the favorite, and you can access it. But again, it gets it out of your inbox. I'm moving this back to my inbox because that's where I prefer that it live. But again, if the goal is to keep your inbox like a working space, use archive to get rid of stuff you don't care about, the stuff you need to reference but isn't necessarily waiting on you to do some work, then you can favorite. For Microsoft people, I know that there is an option to pin items. So pinning it just ties it to like the very top. That's a very useful tool to be like, these are the most important things. These are emails I definitely need to get back to. So even if your email tends to get bigger than a single page, I do my very best to keep it under 50, so it's all just in front of me at all times. But pinning it just always puts it at the top. Make sure it's at the top of your to-do list. So the goal is between using these three things, hopefully what is visible in your inbox can just be the things that actually requires you to reply back to, something you need to work on, something you just haven't read deep enough yet, but just kind of utilize these very basic tools and your inbox can go from a thing that is incredibly stressful to like a working space where you can kind of be in control of what it is you're working on. I did want to touch briefly on just the idea between a CC and a BCC. So when you send an email, you obviously need like an address to send something to, but the carbon copy just dates back to when there were little carbon copies of papers that you would fill out, right? You complete a form and there was a second one. So you use this when you want to send information to someone, but it isn't really to them. You're just kind of referencing it for them. So whether this is a boss and you just want to make sure they're aware of something that's happening, but the message isn't necessarily to them, you're not waiting for them to respond to you. That's where you use that. The blind carbon copy is the same thing. It's not for them, but they'll still get the message. The only difference is that everybody who receives your message will not see who's getting the blind carbon copy. So you can use this a lot of times. You can even send an email to yourself. And if you want to send a message out to all your students, you can use the blind carbon copy. So that way, all that contact information isn't going to everybody on the email. It is going to each individual, but they can't see all the separate emails and contacts. This can also be a sneaky way to kind of involve staff members or a boss on an email to somebody where you want them to see the communication, but you don't want the receiver to see who is seeing it. So it just puts you in control, kind of who sees those messages. So I kind of want to pause for a second here and just ask, of the people on, are there any other questions relating to email or questions about email specifically? Corey.
Yeah, I just wanted to know, well, kind of maybe say something about that blind carbon copy. It's also nice when you use the BCC, if you have a huge list, because when you CC somebody, that whole list is also there, and it just makes it so that it's a big bunch of text that you don't need, and it eliminates all that text. But the question I had was on the archive. Do you know, is there a point in time where when you put something in archive that it is taken out, or is it just stay in archive for eternity?
I have found it stays in there unless you get to, it's not visible here. There are like storage limits usually within an inbox. So that'd be the only time it's going to go anywhere. And I don't think it's going to auto delete. I think it's just a matter of, it's just going to not let you store any further emails. So that is kind of by institution, how many gigabytes or whatever of emails they let you store. If it gets to that point, you can always just kind of like sort your archive in reverse dates and just kind of delete pages at a time. That is kind of the oldest stuff. But for the most part, emails tend to be on the smaller side. So you can go years and kind of not run into that. But that is my experience, is that it's never going to auto delete, but it will potentially reach a threshold where you'll get stuck, and then it's a little manual labor. But it would do that anyway. Like if you're somebody who just leaves them all in your inbox, they're still there. It's still taking up space. If you're moving them to folders, same thing. It's still kind of taking up space. So it also lets you, if you need to delete stuff, you can kind of delete certain areas. So like if I know I get like a newsletter or some kind of thing from a recipient that comes pretty frequent, that always has like attachments or PDFs attached to it, those are just going to be bigger emails. So I can search for that specific sender and then just delete like all of those emails at a certain point to open up a lot more room. So you can kind of be strategic about what you're deleting. Yeah, that's my archive lane. And then I did link on here, mail merge. I was horrified of mail merge. Corey actually taught me how to do proper mail merges back in the day. I'm not going to go over it in a ton of detail here, but it just allows you to send much more like instead of blind carbon copying 50 students you want to send the same email to, you can easily have those students' information, just basic stuff like name, email, and then whatever other details you want. You can build a spreadsheet that has that information in there, and then it allows you to send an email to every single person on that list, but have it be far more like customized. You can actually say like the person's name, and if they're in a particular program, or if it links their address or their institutional email, like all of that stuff can be included if you use mail merge, because you're basically kind of creating a draft of an email and you're just using some pretty basic kind of language in there that will pull data from your spreadsheet and then send 50 individualized emails instead of one bulk one under a BCC. But I promise, I was intimidated to even use this. I saw Corey do it. I've watched some basic YouTube videos. Like it tends to be pretty straightforward. What you might run into is the permissions. A lot of times you're only allowed to send so many per day with like the free versions of mail merge. So this is where I'm hoping with your institutional accounts, they perhaps have some expanded access so you can use it a little more robustly. But definitely something to look into if you want a more personalized touch, sending mail out to like a lot of recipients. So, okay, moving on to just calendar basics. I don't know, I'm going to go around and show as much on here, but I'm amazed as a professional, both with email and calendar, how many professionals act like just because you send me an email, like that doesn't mean I was supposed to read it. Like that's not an effective way to communicate with me. And maybe I'm just too much of like a millennial and just, I hear from some folks, like, you should have just called me. You should have had a face-to-face conversation. Like in the modern era we live in, I very much think that if an email is sent to you, like there is an expectation you're going to read that, review that, respond back to that person within a reasonable time. Same with your calendar. If there are things on your calendar, people are reaching out to you and trying to plan with you. It's a pretty seamless and effective way to help people stay organized through these like digital platforms are on here. So my basic 3 steps is just like use it for everything. Block out everything. Put every meeting on there. If you do student advising, like find a way to schedule your appointments in there. This is a little complex to talk about on this kind of call because each institution is going to have its own methods, whether you use like a Calendly or whether you have an appointment booking. Like there are ways your students often can just automatically kind of carve out time within your schedule during times that you kind of allow it to do that, but just kind of use your calendar as like the holy grail of how you spend your time, because it's not only helpful for you to stay organized, it makes it easy for both your students, if they're trying to book time with you, or anybody else you work with on your staff in your institution, to just look at your calendar and see when you are available, because nothing is worse than trying to find a time everybody can meet and you're just going back and forth for 15 minutes trying to throw around dates and times. But if everybody, especially when you're talking within your own team, within your institution, if you are sharing calendars, if everyone can view calendars, it makes it so much easier to schedule out time to find meetings. Whatever you use for video chat, if you use Zoom, if you use Teams, if you use kind of the Google chats or the voice, I forget the exact one, like try to integrate that within there. A lot of how we even send this stuff out with NAEOP, we have a Zoom account. I will schedule meetings in Zoom and then save it to the calendar. And then I will then use that calendar to invite people, put notes in I can kind of pull one of these up, I suppose. So here, I'm just pulling up some of these as an example. Like anything I put in this text box here, anybody I add, like these are very easy ways to just update everybody that's involved in that meeting. If you're going to be late, if you need to reschedule, if there are updates, you can add attachments, you can add hyperlinks. Like using your calendar is a very integral way to just communicate information. So that way you don't have to email as much. If I send any kind of updates to everyone on there, it will send out as an email, but it'll send it attached to like a singular event. What drives me nuts is when somebody emails me like Zoom information, but there's no calendar link to it. So all that's forcing me to do is go make my own event on my calendar and copy and paste your Zoom info in there. And then anytime you change anything at all, it's just not going to update in my actual calendar. I'm not going to be able to reference the right stuff. I'm going to have to go find that email again. So the more you can integrate your calendar in just kind of your day-to-day, it's just going to kind of streamline how you can communicate information and keep you organized. And also it just allows you to communicate with everyone that's involved with that. So inviting guests one-on-one, at least in Google, like you just add a bunch of guests. And if you're in Microsoft over here, I gotta actually pull this up. This is definitely not my like work email, so there's nothing in here. But with all these calendars, right, I put a sample, like it is not overly complicated to just type in lots of emails. And this is where sometimes I've seen some issues between Microsoft and Google in terms of keeping things active on your calendar or getting notifications when you have a meeting come up. So those are things you have to be a little mindful of. But just do your very best to invite all the guests that are going to be involved in these meetings, make them recurring. There's so much flexibility in here to kind of use your calendar as a tool to stay organized. That's kind of what I'm trying to get at here. It is not just a thing that's out there, or some people have like their own personal calendar and that's where they put everything. Like I really encourage you to kind of integrate your work calendar with how you do your job, because it's all designed to communicate with each other and just make it easier and more streamlined to do your job. The last piece is with permissions. So this has to do with who can see your calendar. So if you're in your institution, my hope is that you are sharing permissions so that your director, your boss, your other coworkers can all view your calendar. Transparency tends to be good. It helps keep us just honest in the basic work we're doing, but also it allows everybody else to view our calendar. So if everyone from the same team is trying to schedule a meeting, it is so much more streamlined when you can just see everybody's availability and you can just identify where those open slots are. So again, it's just going to streamline your life, make it much simpler, and you're not booking meetings, especially if you're a director trying to book a staff meeting. you think you have consensus, you book it, and then suddenly 3 people can't attend because they had something else on there. Like if you just have shareable calendars, you can kind of see all that stuff beforehand and know what you're getting into. So that is kind of my, and what I have over here is just Google, YouTube, TikTok. They are amazing tools to get better at doing this stuff. Just get used to Googling things, YouTubing it. Like in general, these applications can often do way more than we give it credit for or what we use. So like put in some effort to educate yourself around how to maximize these. Even some like workshops. A lot of us have professional development funds that can be used for things other than like a COE, NAEOP, TRIO specific conference, a priority conference. You can find online workshops that really give you a really in-depth training on Google applications, Microsoft applications. So you can become an expert and really integrate this stuff. If this is like intimidating for you, or if a lot of the concepts I'm throwing out just seem like features that are like in a foreign language to you, I really highly recommend that you take some time to find people who put plenty of content out there to kind of improve your literacy when it comes to these fields. So what I wanted to do here next is just highlight the kind of apps that are available. So Google is going to be the first one we look over. Then I'm doing Microsoft. I don't want to get into like, I'm definitely not going into the weeds, but we can go into the questions area. You can elaborate on these. But again, it's just making sure you're aware of what applications are out there. So if you are a Google campus, I'm sure you're familiar with Google Docs, but they're actually quite wonderful because unlike some word processing thing, or if you have Microsoft Word, it is not based on your computer. It is in the cloud, and it is a shareable document. So anything you are doing as a team, anything you want your students or any staff to be able to view, it is so seamless to give them access. And there's different kinds of access, right? Like if I pull up my Drive, I'm just going to pull this up. This is my log of everything I'm doing every single day. I can pick and choose who I share this stuff with. I can add new people. I can make it just so it's viewable, so it's editing, so they can just comment. Like you have all the power as somebody, but it gives you just a central hub to work together on stuff. That's in theory the beauty of doing everything virtually and through these applications, is that it creates like a centralized community so that there are not 5 different versions of the same outline for some FAFSA workshop you're working on. There's just the one singular item. And the beauty of Google Docs is it has like an archive that goes back to the beginning of the document. If somebody goes in there and really screws something up or deletes all the stuff you've worked on, it isn't just gone forever. You can find historical versions of stuff so you don't just lose it outright. But can be a good recommendation to kind of have a final version that no one's allowed to touch, and then like an editable version, so you can always kind of go back and work on multiple aspects there. So, but it is essentially a word processor. I actually think I prefer Microsoft Word. I think it has better stuff, but the Google Docs is 98% of it, and you might as well use it if you have the Google platform. Google Sheets is all the same stuff I just said about that, except it just applies to, what was Microsoft Excel. It's just spreadsheets, same access to everything. So Google Slides is your old school PowerPoint. You can do PowerPoint, you can do presentations using the slides. Again, all of it's shareable, all of it can be worked on as a group, and you can share it as a group. So that way, instead of all your presentations you do in a classroom stored in your computer, it's just in a public space that people can work on. Forms, people seem to be pretty used to this. They were kind of one of the OG folks that kind of allowed you to create your own kind of form, but it is wonderful. One thing with forms is, and a lot of these things, if you're trying to share these with people outside of your organizations, what I mean by that is if I were to go and make a blank form, the default is under settings, under responses. It's not super easy to find. The default is often only people that are in my domain. So I'm on Oregon Trio Association. Only people that have an email ending in OregonTrio.org can complete this. I definitely don't want that. Almost nobody filling out my forms has that. If you're sending it to students, if you're sending these to people outside of your institution, you do need to make sure you uncheck that. And even as shareability, right? This is no different than kind of a Google Doc. You can add collaborators that can view responses, edit the form with you. Like, it gives you a lot of flexibility, but you do need to know where to look to make that happen. Moving on, these are some of the lesser used, but just again, making sure you know they're available. Translate. Google Translate is just, I mean, you can use just Google, period. It probably is about the same software, but they have an entire app that's designed to help you translate documents, and it's totally free. So again, just bringing that to awareness. Google Sites actually will help you do some website building, and they'll kind of host it on your domain. So if you're just trying to make like very simple websites, if you have some kind of class or a club that you're doing and you don't want to build some monstrous complex website, Google Sites is a very simple way to have a functioning website that your students or staff can kind of use for some smaller projects you're working on. Jamboard is kind of like a big virtual whiteboard. You can throw up post-it note, like it's meant to be kind of an ideation space. It's really good to use in a format like this, where I could have the form, like I could be showing the Jamboard up here now, and I could share the space with all of you, and every one of us could be contributing and kind of adding notes and comments. So similar to a Google Doc, but it's designed to feel more like a whiteboard. So there's just comments everywhere. You can move things around pretty seamlessly. So it can be a good just brainstorming application. Google Drive, that is more or less just where it holds all your documents. So everything we're talking about here is all pretty much stored on your drive, but you can dump in any kind of Adobe files. You can put in MP4s, music files, video files. Like, it's just your drive that exists, that is your cloud-based storage facility. But it unlocks a lot of stuff, and this is how you can share all kinds of stuff. So the same sharing permissions I've been showing with documents can apply to folders as well. You can share access to individual folders. So even though you may have documents within your own drives, I'm like, oh, but I'd love my team to be able to view all my presentations. You can just share that whole folder, and they can see all of your collective presentations. What I highly recommend is that you kind of have these shared drives. So anything that I make in here, the only way anybody can access something on my drives is if I share it. And that's just cumbersome. If you put in some time to make some shared drives, then you can just add individuals, whether they're from your institution or outside it, and they can just view anything that is in there. And those are perfect for event planning or stuff that is based on your entire team. So that way you just have access to everything all the time. I will say this is one of those spaces that gets cumbersome when it's Google versus Microsoft. I cannot add, like, let's say, I'm just going to pick on Shane, right? If I wanted to add Shane into, let's say he wants to join the OTA board. If I wanted to add him to this entire shared folder, and he's a Microsoft campus and not a Google, I'm not going to be able to do it. It's not going to allow me to add a Microsoft account sharing over the folder. I can add him to individual documents, but not the overarching thing. So that's one of those areas that is helpful to know if you're doing some cross collaborating with people from different institutions. I'm not as familiar with the other way around. If you're on Microsoft and SharePoint, I've been able to get added into a handful of SharePoints, and I'm a Google based. So I think SharePoint, which is the Microsoft equivalent, has this fixed. But if you're specifically working with Google, which most of our like regional associations and state leadership focus are all housed there, you may run into some issues. So lastly, Google Chat. So you'll see in your inbox, there is this like chat feature. I've hardly used it, but there's a lot of stuff that could probably be accomplished in the chat instead of having it to be an email. If the whole goal is to make your inbox a productivity station, there's maybe a lot of conversations you can direct through the chats. You can do group chats, like all that kind of stuff that we do on our phone, right? We all understand the basic concept of text messaging. So there's ways to just do that in a separate space that is maybe a little more appropriate for just those ongoing quick conversations, quick questions, instead of losing it in an email. And this is also an application you can download on your phone. So you can almost have like group chats, like a text going on with your team, but they don't need your like personal work number, or you can mute it pretty easily without muting the rest of your actual text messages on your phone. So it's something I recommend people use more of, again, more to just declutter your inbox. Password manager, if you are not using any kind of password manager, or God forbid you're somebody who still has like one password for everything, I swear to you, there are like pretty easy ways to have far more secure passwords by utilizing applications like this, where it can just store and randomize your passwords. And, it just will autofill in most cases if you primarily use like a Chrome, if you're a Google. So just taking a little time to move everything over there can make your life so much easier moving forward. Classroom allows you just to customize your own class or course. A lot of us have kind of different platforms within our college, but if again, you're trying to just do your own little mini project, mini workshop, it can be a creative way to just have a really nice platform to like a playground to build out your own kind of class for work we do. And lastly is groups. You can create your own email list. It's mostly just email-based stuff. But yeah, we use these for the listservs. The whole reason you all are on this is because you're on probably one of these listservs. So I just send information out to there, and it's an efficient way to get information out. You may run into, if you're trying to send this to students, sometimes it gets complicated because like at a high school, if you're going to high school students, they may only allow messages to come from inside the domain. So you may need to have like a Google-based email out of your high school, and then you can make a group and send messages to them. If you try to do it from your institution email to high school, they might just get blocked. So you kind of have to have some nuanced understanding of kind of who you're trying to send messages to and where those may potentially end up. But that is kind of my quick overview of kind of the big primary apps that I think can have some practicality in the work that we do. I'm going to pause here just for a quick second. Are there any questions or comments on anything I've been going over as far as the Google apps? Okay. The Microsoft should be faster, probably because there's almost a 1-for-1 with everything. And, within your Office 365, when you're logged in there, depending on the permissions that your institution has, but you have access to way more than like Word, Excel, PowerPoint, and your Outlook. Even the stuff just on this menu, right? Like there's a whole giant, and I didn't even necessarily cover all of them, but there is a lot more applications that are available to you. So I kind of want to just draw some attention to those. So Word, it's the same thing, but again, it's all like cloud-based. The whole point of doing it in Office 365 is that it's not stored just on your own computer. It's accessible online. You can share it with people. You can have your entire team have access the same way that all those Google apps, everyone can be working in the same document at the same time, making comments, making suggestions. All that applies to all of these applications as well. It's just all done on the Office 365 platform instead of through like kind of the Google Workspace. So Word is your word processing stuff, Excel, spreadsheets, PowerPoint, same thing, presentations. Forms, a lot of people who I know are Microsoft or will still use Google Forms, but I swear to you, the Microsoft Forms works the same. It is the exact same thing, and it just allows you to kind of store it all internally. I'm not going to like stop you from using Google Forms. I just want to make sure people know that Microsoft has the equivalent version. And I found that it even has a few more features. I would say almost across the board, the Microsoft apps tend to have a few more features than the Google ones. The Google are just trying to be kind of carbon copies of the OG Microsoft. So I kind of prefer Forms. I just am Google based, so I mostly use the Google Forms over Microsoft, but they have all the same applications. All right, so once we start getting into some of these other ones, here's where we'll start to see some differentiation. Your OneDrive is the equivalent of like the Google Drive. It's just your online kind of storage space for all things virtual. You can put all of these previous documents in there. You can upload PDFs, you can upload video files, same thing. You can share permissions, all of that stuff applies. Teams gets a little intersecting here. It's very much designed to be like this collaborative software where you can build your own team and you can have chats on Teams. You can have access to your OneDrive and all of those files. You can, a lot of the same exact features that we're kind of talking about with all of this stuff. There can be a notebook. You can log activities. Thanks, Corey. I will touch on InDesign too. I know he had mentioned Adobe, so I'll address those at the end. Teams is meant to be kind of like a working application. So instead of having your OneDrive open in all these separate places, having a chat open separate, like the Teams is designed to be just like a cooler common space that everybody can exist within where they can contribute and just have the chat, have files you're working on, and just be collaborative. So some folks use this a ton. Other folks almost don't use it at all, is kind of what I have heard. But it's a way to kind of integrate a bunch of these in a more seamless way that is a little more streamlined. OneNote is a digital notebook, so it's going to be, it's similar to Word. It's just you can build it. It's a more complex document than Word. In Word, you're just talking a single like document, and then you have to make a new document. On OneNote, you can kind of like make a heading and then a subheading. Like, it allows you to be a bit more organized, but it similarly functions like a Word. So I've seen some people almost prefer to use OneNote for their projects because they can have a little more functionality in there. Everybody can still be working together. But oh, there is a good question there. Has anyone used a TeamSpace to kind of have that be a hub for students? Because they don't have like a classroom designer in the same way Google does, but you could absolutely build that in Teams, especially if it's, Liz, are you a pre-college or college?
I'm at a university.
Yeah, so I think that's the perfect example of that, because they're all going to have that institutional, so there shouldn't be any like permission issues where you can create your own hub there. Madeline, do you want to chime in and maybe about how you guys use it for your communication?
Yeah, we use it at Green River College, so we use that for all of our phones, communicating and sending out information within all of the hubs of campus. Especially during COVID, we were trying to find ways, since our telephones, no one was physically there, so we found ways to do it online. So that way we can work hybrid and also work in person.
Have students been fairly responsive on that platform? Like, do they use it?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, that's a great example of just kind of take a tool that already exists and you can make, like, particularly in our work in the trail world, like it'd be amazing if we just had our own little space to kind of present this stuff with students. I know there are some people that make like Canvas shells around the same thing. You kind of make that classroom using the software your community provides, but the Teams is a pretty less intimidating than having to build an entire Canvas shell version of doing that. So Loop is like a planning platform. That would be how I describe it. It allows you to integrate in a lot of this kind of stuff. Right, like Teams gets everyone in one place. You can all see it together. OneNote allows you to put a little more complex information on the screen at the same time and almost have kind of subcategories and subdocuments in the way that Word doesn't. Loop kind of integrates all that, and it can be like a planning platform. So this is probably something you would use more with your own internal Trio team. It's worth poking around in because it basically is just a space that, in like OneDrive is where it's all stored. It's not necessarily super user friendly or as accessible. Like, it's just folders that you have to access documents. Loop allows you to have more creativity and creativeness in kind of just the structure and how you're viewing information and assigning topics. So it's not one I'm super familiar with on the Microsoft side. But if you're really looking to kind of have your own internal, if you're looking for those hubs, what works best, it's definitely worth looking at if you're on Microsoft. And then the last pieces on here, the people is the same thing as the groups. It's just an email list. So it allows you to kind of create your own custom email list with your own, email address, essentially, to easily send information out, at least through email. These two are more just, I imagine a lot of people have sticky notes or a notebook that are just scrawled with our like to-do list. There literally is an app called To Do. So you can just make a to-do list, and then that allows you to like archive it too. I love to like cross the crap out of something or delete something on my to-do list. But if you actually use the To Do app, you could just kind of archive stuff. But again, if you're just trying to stay more organized, it can be a good tool. I love using sticky notes. Instead of actually writing sticky notes, you can just kind of have these up on your desktop in the background. And again, it's all saved to the cloud. So even if you log in to a computer for somewhere else, you don't necessarily like lose those virtual sticky notes. So they literally look like a sticky note. They just kind of like are on your screen. You can have them in different colors, have multiple, have one that's really huge, but If you're just looking for some basic reminders, to-dos just in your face, and you don't want to clutter your physical workspace, I like sticky notes for that. And then the last piece is designer. If anybody is doing work around social media, Microsoft kind of has, it's similar-ish to like a Canva or some of the Adobe software, but it's specific, and it has some good AI integrations where if you're just looking for some basic posts to put on like TikTok or your social media or a website or an email header, it's a pretty streamlined free service that comes with the Microsoft apps that can be utilized to kind of simplify what otherwise might take you, especially if you're not technologically savvy, what might take you a pretty long time to facilitate. So any questions or thoughts on any of these Microsoft applications? Okay, the last piece I'm going to chat about is chat before I get to general questions. So again, I recommend this when you're talking about all communications more between your team. Like there's a lot of stuff that just doesn't need to be an email. We want to reduce email clutter, not make that a productive space, not just a space full of a lot of stuff. So if you're talking to the same people quite frequently, whether you are in like your, oh, this is going to make me, see, this is, you can't get it to the Outlook. This is where you have to use Teams for Microsoft. So there's no chat feature to my knowledge, unless somebody can correct me here, than Outlook. But that's where Teams comes in, is you can just have conversations. So it's not an email. If you're in Google, the chat function is just kind of built right within there. But I just really recommend you try to shift stuff over there, because it's just going to reduce the amount of other emails coming in. And oftentimes those communications are going to take more of a precedent anyway. So it just allows it to be its own separate space. And then it's just it's just an ongoing chat. It's easier to kind of archive stuff than constantly filing away emails, leaving them on read, archiving them. Like then that just turns into a lot of disconnected communications instead of like one group chat with your whole team. So you can also just link all these documents, all these applications I'm talking about. You can put links to those in the chat. So it can just be a convenient way to kind of communicate out, funnel everybody to these centralized documents. And again, you can kind of have apps, whether it is Teams, whether it is the chat app with Google, on your mobile device, so it can be its own standalone thing. I didn't even know Sticky Notes was a phone app too. So yeah, it seems simple, but it's amazing whether it's on your phone or on your computer, just how simple something like the Sticky Notes can be. So there was one comment Corey had brought up before about Adobe InDesign. This is, I don't know if all institutions pay to give you access to Adobe. It's just like you can make pretty much anything in InDesign. You can build a newsletter, you can build programs, it has a lot of features in there. That is very much for like the people that love technology, love creating. You kind of start from scratch, usually in InDesign. What I would recommend for the people that are a little on the new side is more Canva. So if you're just looking to do content create, this entire presentation I'm showing you was just all the fancy design features are just some Canva shell, right? I just threw my words on top of it. I'm not trying to take credit. I'm trying to make my life simpler and just save myself time. So everything you're seeing in here is just stuff I got from Canva on this presentation. So whether you're making social media posts, documents, flyers, just about anything, I like Canva because I have the pro version on mine, but even the free version has a ton of flexibility, and you can do so many things. There's a lot of templates out there. And then this is also something you can share with your team. So it's not part of the larger Google, Microsoft kind of workspaces we're talking about here, but can be a really helpful kind of additional app. I know I mentioned this Microsoft Designer is meant to be Microsoft's version of that, but I just prefer Canva myself. And Adobe is not like PDFs are amazing. All the stuff in Adobe can all be stored in these like OneDrive or on your Google Drive, but they're not as editable. Like usually you need separate Adobe permissions for those. But Adobe is very much like what the hardcore professionals use, but I'm not trying to be that. I'm trying to be just efficient and fast. So I try to use these simple applications that are free and that give me some nice templates, because I don't need it to be perfect. I just need to look like a professional and I'm doing a pretty good job in the stuff I'm using. So that is kind of a lot of information thrown at you in about 40 minutes here, but I do want to open up to just questions, comments, like specific asks. Like I really much want to just open the floor here and let people ask specific stuff or contribute if they have preferences themselves.
Hey, Matt, I was just hoping maybe confirm it. Sorry, if I missed it and you said it. When I send emails to students, I use the BCC because I thought we were supposed to do that, protect the privacy of students in the program. Is that consistent throughout, our working space or culture, or is that just maybe a specific thing that I picked up working back up at Clatsop and just kind of carried it with me?
Yeah, I would definitely do that as a standard practice, so that way it's each student just feels like they're getting an individualized email and they can't see the whole list. And Corey had mentioned this earlier before he had to leave. It just cluttered, like I'm trying to find it. I'm gonna show you all a quick example of like why it looks better that way. Okay, so like if they were to open this email, like they would see this obnoxious list of a bunch of names on here. If I put them in like carbon copied or two. So they open the email and they get a bunch of stuff, but I'm only seeing it because I sent it so I can see the blind carbon copy. All they're seeing is just I sent an email to myself and then they're in the BCC. So I would say that definitely should be standard practice, unless you are trying to do kind of the mail merge aspects where you're trying to individualize it, because that will also send it individualized. You can protect them in that way too. It's just a little more steps. So yeah.
Okay, cool. Thank you.
I'm curious, is there anybody on here who is like a 3,000 unread email? No, I don't want to call you out, but I want to make sure both sides can provide their perspective. I'm just very clearly not that kind of person. So I kind of want to give you people like yourself space to maybe stand up for like why I like everything in the inbox and maybe provide some counterfactuals or why that maybe works for them, because I'm kind of just inbox shaming people here a little bit and how I'm presenting the technology. So
I'll speak up again. I'm one of those people that keep it all in the inbox. I also am an advisor that I can stay up on my emails, as opposed to like maybe other advisors or directors who maybe get a whole lot more emails than I do. I can keep it within 50 to 25 on a daily basis to keep it manageable. It is super overwhelming to have them all in there. I had thought about using the archive thing, but I guess I keep them all in there just in case I ever need to get back to it quickly, to prove something or whatever it is, just that I know it's in there because I never delete anything. And I thought about doing the archive thing, but it's as opposed to like the other ones where you start or whatever, there's like a folder. I know where the folder is. I know I can find that again. The archive, I feel like it just disappears. And then it's on me to remember like the words, the key sequence words, specific words that are in it to pull it back up. And so it's just, since it's not super easy accessible, I just kind of suck it up and just leave it in my inbox and just star the ones that are important and keep it within 50 emails and try to never go. And it's typically much lower than that, but that's the worst case scenario. It is stressful. That's just how I operate.
I'm going to show you, when you archive it, it goes out of your inbox, but there's this thing called all mail and it's all back. It's all back. Everything.
Okay, so that's all I have to do. Cheers. Thank you.
So like the all mail is literally what you're talking about. And then it allows your inbox to be working. And I'm pretty sure.
Okay. That's what I needed to know. Thank you.
Wrong thing. Yeah. Not to, like, I get that you want to have access, but even, like with this one, there's a whole inbox on Outlook, and then there is just like a whole archive. So that will ultimately separate them, but specifically in Google. Like
Whichever-
all mail is
yeah.
exactly what you're talking about,
Okay.
but it allows you to keep inbox as a working space compared to a storage space. Now,
Thank
some
you.
people just love their folders, but I
Yeah.
just know how intimidating it can be to fold. And then
Yeah.
I've seen people get like foldered out, where
Yeah.
suddenly you have 400 folders, and you're like, and because if you're not consistent in how you're foldering,
Yeah.
it kind of makes them useless. Because when you go in there and you can't find the information you're looking for, then it's like, crap, what was the folder I put it in? So I used to be a folder person, and I just moved to archive once I understood how it works, because I find it faster, honestly, to just kind of search that way.
Okay.
You can make subfolders, right? If you want to be a folder person, like I think in Google, they're labels, right? Whether it's folders or labels, you can make a folder and a subfolder and a subfolder and a subfolder. But again, you're kind of just putting more of a mental burden.
Yeah.
Because the only way that is effective is if you are 100% consistent in how you're archiving your information. So the more folders, the more burden it's kind of putting on you. And I just decided I'd rather have to deal with searching for it. And sometimes that it can be tricky to find an email, right? You're searching your entire inbox history and you just need to rely on some good search methods. So you're not like people, and I'm not saying you, Shane, but like people are not wrong where sometimes stuff can go, but it isn't lost. It's in there somewhere. You just have to find a way to, but that's why if it's really important, star it and then archive it, right? Because searching my starred folder is going to be way more targeted than every email ever. So I know I have like nothing in the stars, but you could easily have like anything that's kind of relevant or maybe useful information, or just like, oh, that was a cool email on the listserv about good resources for like fast updates.
Yeah.
I don't want to keep that in my inbox, right? But I want to have access to it. That's when I use the star, because it makes it easier to find quickly should I need it.
Cool. Thank you. I appreciate that.
Yeah. Any other comments or questions here? Okay, well, before I totally sign off here, I did want to show, I had it kind of down here at the bottom, but at our website, naeoptrio.org, under events and professional development series is every single recording we've ever done as part of this series. So there's a lot of kind of tech talk stuff. So we have a Canva deep dive. We have an InDesign, I think 2-part deep dive. Maybe it's only, I think there's 2 of them on here. We did like a 2-part deep dive. So there's like 2 hours on InDesign. So a lot of this stuff we're talking about, social media, there's a bunch of resources that exist on here. So you can easily just watch a YouTube video, watch it at ×2 speed if you don't want to sit there for an hour, and kind of get access to more of these resources. So this recording will also be going up if you want to reference this at any other point in time. But other than that, I want to thank you all for just chiming in, and hopefully I've made your world feel a little more productive and like you kind of are the master of your literal domain, whether that is Google or Microsoft. So appreciate the time today.